Buddha said, as in our opening words, life is suffering. Once you learn to accept suffering, life will cease to be suffering. Or in the words of Ruth Wertmeier, I don't know if anyone remembers her. She was like the sex therapist that used to be on TV all the time. Dr. Ruth, yeah. She says that the life is not all soft grass. It's like a mountain road with many, many rocks, but it always brings us higher and higher towards the sun. So when I was preparing for this talk tonight on Let It Be, Paul McCarthy's song Let It Be, I went in, I always thought that the Mother Mary part of the song, the chorus, which I just love, Mother Mary calls to me, I sing it all the time, meant Jesus' mother, but it didn't. And I'm sure probably a lot of you know this story. But the story goes that Paul, it was during the time when the Beatles were having a lot of struggles in their life. And they were deciding that they were maybe going to break up. And they were going to no longer be together as the Beatles. And Paul said that all of the other Beatles, Ringo and George and John, had partners and they had homes. He was single, and he hadn't met Linda yet, and he was living in an apartment in London. And he was feeling all the stress of the fact that they weren't getting along real well and that they were thinking of breaking up. And he went to bed one night, and he was tossing and turning in his bed, and he fell asleep, and he had this dream that his mother, who had died when he was a teenager, whose name was Mary, came to him and said, "Let it be." And he got up, and he sat down at the piano, and he wrote the song, "Let It Be." So I started thinking about what I was like imagining what he must have been feeling in that moment. In that moment of tossing and turning in bed, feeling like, oh my God, who am I going to be if I'm not a Beatle? If I'm not part of this Fab Four anymore, who will I be? Will they still want me? Will they want to hear me as Paul McCartney? What if this is the end of my musical career? Who am I without these men I grew up with and suffered with and struggled with and enjoyed with? Who am I separate from them? And then I started thinking about all the times in my life when I have been at that place. How many times have each one of you been at that place? I'd like you to just take a moment, take a deep breath, and just close your eyes and think about that. Think about those times, perhaps a divorce, when you're ending one life that you've been with somebody for so long, and all of a sudden that's changing. Who are you without that person in your life? Perhaps it's the death of a partner or a spouse or a parent. Who am I if I'm not mother, if I'm not father, if I'm not child? Who am I if I'm not wife or husband? Will my life go on? What will it be like? How about the ending of a job? My daughter was in a job for 18 years and they laid her off. I know she went through fear of what will I do next? Will I be able to support my family? Will I be able to make it? What's going to happen next? How will the money, how will I do it? How about parents whose children are going off to college? Oh my gosh, when my youngest left the house, it was like, who am I if I'm not this parent every day, this single parent? My whole focus is these children. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? What about our health? How about we have health challenges? We get a diagnosis or our body all of a sudden is changing on us. Who am I if I'm not this person I was? Who will I become? What will be next? And that's where Paul was in this moment. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary calls to me. Mother Mary called to him, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. Who's your Mother Mary? Who's your Mother Mary? Is it Jesus? Is it the Buddha? Is it Christianity? Krishna, Muhammad? Is it your meditation practice, your yoga practice? Is it your intuition? Is it that guide inside, your higher power? Can your pet be your Mother Mary? Someone that comes and sits on your lap when you're in that time to struggle and just calms you and you get to that place of let it be? Let it be? Thursday, I was here setting up for a coffee house, and I was in the kitchen, and Reverend Charlie was here, and he was saying, how's your sermon coming for Sunday? And I went, oh, gosh, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm feeling a little stressed. He goes, let it be. And I went, duh! Right, I'm talking about let it be. And I'm in all this stress. So who is it that calls to us with those words of wisdom when we are in that place of forgetting? When we're in that place of forgetting, when we're in that place, in our hour of darkness, as Paul writes, in that hour of darkness, who is it that we allow in that comes into us and says, let it be? Now, I have a teacher, some of you know I've been studying with this woman called Mama Gina, and I've been going to these trainings, and I just love Mama Gina. And she's got this concept called rupture to rapture. And she says there are many times in our lives when we rupture, when we have to break open, when we are being called to a higher place, to raise towards that sun. And I think of the seed under the ground and how it has to break open for the flower to emerge. And so we rupture, whether it's, you believe it's, divine right order, or God does it, or if it's just chance, or it's circumstance, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It happens. There are times in our lives when we are called to rupture so that we can get to rapture. Tony Robbins, another one of my mentors, says that there are only two things. We have two needs in this life to make us feel spiritually fulfilled. One is the need to grow, and the other is the need to contribute. There are so many times when we are in our place in our lives, when we are in stagnant places, when we are not moving, and we are not growing, and we have a need to grow. So these situations will come, will challenge us, will push us, will take us to our limits, will take us into our hour of darkness, into that place inside of us where we are asked to grow and to be bigger than we thought we could be. When I got home from my training last weekend, I had an email waiting for me from Wayne saying, hey, I want you to sing with me on Friday night at the coffee house. Now, I'd always had a dream of singing up on the stage, but most of you know that come to coffee house, I always stand in the back, and I don't sing. I sing, but I don't come forth to sing. And there's a safety in that. I can stay back there, and I can sing my little heart out, and I don't have to worry about anybody judging it. I don't have to worry about being off key or out of tune. I could just be back there singing. People go, good job, great voice, nice voice, why don't you come up front? I never do it because I've been too afraid to put myself. So when I got this email, I felt terror, just terror inside my body. I couldn't breathe for a little bit. I just was sitting there, and I thought, okay, just let this be. Let this be. And so because I'm at a place in my life where I'm deciding to say yes to life, to say yes to all the experiences that present to me, I said yes to Wayne. And he was wonderful. He guided me through it, and I got up here and I sang, and people liked it, and it was okay, and I can't wait to do it again.
In capital letters, her response was OMG.
Yeah, it was really scary. So, we all have these times in our lives when we are called to be bigger, to reach out, to be greater, to move forward. Because Paul says in his song, in my hour of darkness, there is still a light that shines on me. There is still a light that shines on me. There is still a light within me that's calling me always to move upward, to move further, to move towards that sun. And so, when the night is cloudy, and there is a light that shines on me, shines on till tomorrow, let it be. He talks about how difficult this was for him. Can you imagine that? You know, like, what if I don't make it? What if I'm not? What if I had stood up here and flopped? You know, would I have still been loved? So how often do we spend our time in the fear, in the not moving forward, in the quitting, in the hiding and staying little and staying small? We have two needs: to grow and to contribute. I remember in 1969, I was living in Brigantine, and it was the time of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. A hippie time. I was a real hippie. And as some of you heard my story before. And I had a lot of friends who did drugs. Now, I didn't do drugs, but they did. And my mother used to say to me, Theresa Ann, she'd say, you're judged by the company you keep. And I thought, of course, my mother didn't know what she was talking about. She couldn't possibly understand that I didn't have to use drugs to be with drug people. You know, they were my friends, and they were all the people I knew, and just because they did it didn't mean I couldn't be friends with them. And so we would party every weekend. And one night, I was in bed, and my door was broken in by the police. And they came in, and they found drugs in my house. And I didn't do drugs. And I'm saying, but I'm innocent, I don't do this, I didn't do this. But they found them. So I was humiliated. My name was in the paper. I worked in Brigantine at the time, so it was all over the newspaper. My father, I had to call him in the middle of the night to come get my daughter, and he took he put his house up for me for bail. I had to call on friends. I knew a judge, got the bail reduced. I mean, it was horrendous. I was so frightened, so fearful, so embarrassed, so humiliated, so everything, and so angry that this could happen to me. How could this happen to me? I'm a good person. I don't do this. And I was blaming everybody. And I didn't realize this till years later, that was my rupture. That was me going down the wrong path. Even though I didn't do drugs, how long would it be before I tried? How long would it be before I said, oh, let me just try a little bit? And I know that I would not be standing here today if that rupture hadn't occurred for me. If that time in my life that broke me open and put me full of fear and full of humility hadn't happened. And I was able to go on to do and to contribute in ways, being one of the 5 women that started the women's shelter and starting the Rape Crisis Center and putting all that energy into activism and doing things, becoming a minister, becoming a doctor. I never could have done that if I had stayed on that path. And I think the hardest part was knowing that my mother was right. You are judged by the company. So, rupture to rapture, being broken open. How many times have we created this in our lives, this time of suffering? In the work that I do, we do these 12 stages of healing. The first stage is suffering. The second stage is looking for somebody to try to get rid of the suffering. Who's going to fix this for me? Who's going to be the one that can heal me and fix this? The third stage is saying, nobody can heal this for me. Nobody can do this. I'm stuck in this. Oh my God, will I be here forever? The fourth is being angry, really angry, because here I am with this, and nothing's working, and nothing's going to help, and nothing's going to change it. And the fifth stage is going into that place of saying, oh, let me crawl into this suffering. Let me be here. Let me be in this experience, because the only person that's going to heal me is me. The only person that's going to fix this is me. The only person that can do this is me. And then it goes on. There's 12 more stages to it. But it's like really looking at our inner guidance and our inner intuition. Mother Mary calls to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Can you hear that? Who is your Mother Mary? Who calls to you when you're in this time, in this place? My belief is, I always tell my practice members, you got to feel it to heal it. You got to crawl into it to experience it. When they come in pain, I say, breathe into it. Breathe in your nose and out your mouth. Breathe into it. Feel the experience. Know that you can heal this. Know that you have everything within you. And sometimes that healing means that we have surrendered to the suffering so that we can find this stillness. So like the Buddha says, we can surrender to the suffering, and that's when we know there is no suffering. There is no suffering but was in our mind. It's our minds that create so much of the pain we go through. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Byron Katie. Have you heard of her? She's this like motivational person. And she says that when we're in this struggle, there's 4 questions. The first question is it true? So Paul could be laying in that bed, tossing and turning and saying, oh my God, this is horrible. Nobody's going to want me. Nobody's going to like me. I'm never going to get past this. I'm never going to be anything other than, a beetle. You say, is this true? Is it true? Is it absolutely true? How do you know? We don't know the future. How does he know if it's true? But then she goes on to say, what does having this thought make me feel? Well, having this thought makes me feel stressful. It makes me feel down. It makes me feel depressed. It makes me feel yucky. And then the 4th question is, how would I feel without this thought? Where would I be without this thought? So it's our thoughts so much of the time that create so much of the suffering. So much of the suffering. Eckhart Tolle says that every spiritual path has something that they say about non-resistance. Non-resistance. Letting go of the resistance. Letting go of the thoughts inside of our head that take us down that path to suffering. When we crawl into it, when we let ourselves have the experience of feeling the pain or the suffering, that's where we go to in a second. We can end our pain in a second by allowing ourselves to connect to it, by allowing ourselves to have our Mother Mary speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. Let it be. I was stressing about the top. Let it be. Stressing about being broken open. Let it be. Getting to that place of trust in our lives. Trust. I mean, I think that's what the Earth Walk journey teaches us. I think the further we go on this path, or at least for me, the higher I go, or the further I go, or the longer I live, I've had enough life experience to know that it all turns around. It all turns around. We do move on. We do grow. We do go further. We do go past. Paul McCartney went on to become Paul McCartney. He married Linda, had all these great children. He brought the world this beautiful, beautiful music that may not have happened if he had stayed with the Beatles. And so we do move past it. And I love his last line because I wake up to the sound of music. So that's where we wake up to. That Barbara talks about that. The sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. jukebox said, what the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. What do you do in your meditation? Devotee said. I was communing with God. What did God tell you? What did you tell God? I didn't tell God anything. I didn't say anything to God. I was listening. Then what did God tell you? He did not tell me anything either. He was listening. There's a story about the Buddha that he was walking down a path with several of his devotees. And they stop by a river, and the Buddha says to the devotee, I'm thirsty, would you get me some water? So the devotee goes to the water, and just then a cart goes through the river and stirs up all the mud. And so he cannot get clear water for the Buddha. So he goes back and he says, Master, the water's all muddy, it's full of turbulence, and I can't get you a drink. And the Buddha goes, okay. So they sat there for a little while and relaxed and rested. And then a little while later, the Buddha says to the devotee, I'm thirsty. Would you get me some water? So the devotee goes over, and it's still full of mud. And he can't get it clear. It's a little clearer, but not very much, and he can't really get some water. So he goes back and he says, Master, I can't get you water. It's still muddy. The Buddha goes, okay, all right. So they sit there a little while longer, and they're waiting and probably chatting, who knows. And then the Buddha says, I'm thirsty. Would you go get me some water? And the devotee goes, okay. And he goes over, and the water's clear as anything. The mud had all settled. And he gets his cup and he brings back the water to the Buddha. And the Buddha says to him, do you see what you did to get me that clear glass of water? Do you see what you did to make that mud